Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. I wanted to take a second before we started here to talk about a friend of mine named Derek Manger. He was in a pretty bad car accident a few months ago, and it had set him back financially for work. Bills were compiling, chronic pain, and it just seemed apparently to be too much for him. And Derek made the choice to take his own life earlier this week. So I just wanted to take a second to say that there is help for anybody out there who is struggling with these feelings. We know that these feelings are real, but take it from somebody who's been in one of the darkest places that you could imagine and came out the other side. The best days aren't behind you. Please reach out and get help. If you have somebody who you're worried about, please check on your friends. And yeah, outside of that, I would just like to say take care of each other and enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Talksicology, brought to you by Recovery Unplugged. Here at Talksicology, we talk all things addiction, recovery, and mental health. Tonight's guest, addiction professional Sherri Layton. I'm your co-host, Jason Cabello, and as always, your host and mine, Joseph Gorordo.
Hey, everybody.
Clap.
Welcome to this week's episode of Talksicology. Jason, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right, man. I was just
You look like you
listening
got
to
a
you
little
talk.
sun.
Excuse me?
You look like you got a little sun. You got a little color.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been standing out in the field a lot the past couple weeks. I just started coaching my son Jackson's, my 10-year-old Jackson's Little League baseball team, the Red Sox.
Oh.
And I think we've talked about this. I was not a sports guy. I've always been a books and movies and music guy. Never had a desire to coach, and ended up getting roped into this, right? Kind of dreading it. And it has absolutely become the highlights of my life the last couple
That's
weeks.
great.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
man. It's I think it's making me a better boss at work too.
Are you? I'll have to ask some of your subordinates if
Yeah.
that's the case.
Yeah. But I was thinking when you were doing the intro there, I think it's important, right? We talk about heavy things on this show, and then we also try to keep it light sometimes because there's a lot of joy to be had, like coaching your kid in Little League baseball. But over the course of the pandemic, I lost a couple friends too. I think most Americans have lost a couple friends, whether it be to COVID or mental health or overdose or whatever, right? Overdose numbers jumped like 40 something percent in 2 years. And just how important it is to, ask your friends if you're okay, if they're okay, right? I had a friend who had 12 years sober, and I just kind of assumed, right? Like the thought of a
Right.
relapse never crossed my mind. And actually, I had two friends with double-digit years that both relapsed, and one of them made it back in, and is thriving and has grown from the experience, and the other one, I see pictures of his kids on Facebook.
That's so sad. That's what keeps me constantly working on myself and not getting too complacent in my recovery.
Yeah,
Um, because if I forget and think like I got this thing made and I could handle shit like that's where the trouble starts is when I start, paving my own way. It's never worked before, and I have to keep reminding myself that I am in this for the long haul. This is not
yeah,
there's no graduation to recovery.
yeah. I think our friend of the show, Andrew Sawson, has a little saying: "Is can I constant and never-ending improvement?" And I think
Oh,
it's a great kind of little acronym for at work, personal, spiritual, relationships, and for podcasts.
for podcasts.
And we here at Toxicology are constantly looking for ways to improve the show. And this week we have a brand new segment for y'all.
Press radio and film.
Jason, you did the voiceover on that. You want to tell us a little bit about this new segment?
Yeah, press, radio, and film. It's just a little bit, we get to talk about things that we see, news articles that we read. Maybe we saw something recovery based in a movie, in a song, or somebody, some celebrity is celebrating an anniversary of some sort, a sobriety birthday. We like to celebrate things like that and just talk about it.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. I think you brought us something today from a TV film.
From a podcast, yeah. So Jason Lee, who is it was a skateboarding podcast, and if you don't know Jason Lee from My Name Is Earl, the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, he was a pro skateboarder in the 80s and 90s, and it was one of my absolute favorites. But he was on the show.
He
My
was
Name Is
also in
Earl.
all the early Kevin Smith films.
He was Mallrats. That was his debut. But his show, My Name Is Earl, I saw a lot of parallels to, recovery in that, because he has his list and everything. So if you want to, there was a little clip out of there if you want to roll the clip.
I've had letters where it's like, oh, I was a heavy alcoholic, or I was kind of doing and watching Earl genuinely changed my deal.
Oh, wow.
I've been sober for, 10 years, or I made my own list. And you're kind of like, is this real? Do I believe that? And you're kind of like, I think this is real.
Right.
And you kind of like, you're working a job and you're enjoying it, but it's also a grind. You're getting up at 6 a.m, you're driving out to Van Nuys, and you're working 14 hours a day. Wow. You're grateful, and you're always in a good mood, and you want to make sure that the hardworking crew around you is stoked.
Yeah.
You always want to be happy, and you always want to greet people effusively and with a big smile, because we're lucky to be in that position.
Yeah.
So the first time I ever saw the show My Name Is Earl was actually also the first time I was ever in rehab.
Oh.
Yeah. I was at the Patricia movement, free rehab in San Antonio, Texas. It doesn't exist anymore. Some people believe it to be the first. It was called an alcoholic hospital when it first opened.
Oh, wow.
They would let us watch My Name Is Earl because he was making amends.
Right.
But we were not allowed to watch The Simpsons.
Yeah.
A lot of beer.
That's true. I could see that. But yeah, My Name Is Earl was a very positive show with that list too. It was because I saw it before I was familiar with any recovery stuff, and just thought it was like a good feel good show. And this guy's going around and making amends, and funny enough, when I was watching that show, I was in probably the apex of my scumbaggery. So it was like it was like, oh, that'd be nice to do one day. All these people that I fucked over and robbed or whatever, maybe I'll make amends one day. So yeah, there we go. Full circle.
Love it. So I also brought something to discuss today, and I have completely lost the screenshot that I sent to y'all. But I remember what it was about. So there's this new app that popped up on my Facebook feed because Facebook knows their audience, right?
Right.
It is an ad for a new app that is being promoted. It's a recovery app, and they have kind of all the recovery stuff you'd expect. Like a sobriety clock and some 12-steppy stuff. There we go. What's it called, Jason?
Betterapp.ca.
Betterapp.ca. And something that I thought was real interesting is they have a never use alone feature on their app. Never use alone is a really popular harm reduction concept, which is basically, if you don't shoot up or use drugs by yourself, you're a lot less likely to overdose and die, right? There's going to be somebody around to call 911, hit you with some Narcan, etc. And so basically the way the app works is people sign up to be like watchers or spotters, and you log on and you say, I'm about to do a shot of dope. Wow. And the spotter, a little timer starts, and the spotter watches for you to stop the timer after you're done, to say like, yeah, I'm okay. And if they don't see the timer go off in a certain amount of time, they then are able to hit a little thing and alert 911 where you are to go help you out. So
Yeah, I mean, I have some mixed feelings about, not mixed feelings, but there's questions that I have. But I mean, I think as a whole, it seems like a great idea. Anything to, prevent somebody from overdosing and dying. That sounds fantastic.
yeah, I mean, I love that definition of harm reduction as uh, simply the pursuit of the reduction of human suffering, right? And
Right.
death causes suffering. I know I'm a little bit more liberal than you are on the harm reduction stuff, but
No, yeah, okay.
yeah, I just thought that was really cool. I thought it was really interesting that that I was getting an ad for something like that. Like harm reduction seems to really be entering the mainstream discourse to a certain degree, which
Right. Thankfully.
yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, my only question is like, do you have to disclose your location first? Because I could see me all like twacked out on whatever I was on. Like, I'm not sharing my location here because I'm already looking out the window every, 15 seconds or whatever. So
Yeah,
I'm sure there are some variables that I'm sure, and, this is what they're beta testing it. I'm sure it'll
yeah,
start off
yeah.
and
It's
then
a
it'll get
yeah.
better and better. And, but yeah, anything that saves lives, man, I'm all for it.
Saving lives with an app. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you know what else is pretty cool though?
What's that?
Today we have on one of my top 5 dream guests from when we first started doing this, and it was still the Dope Sick podcast. I remember bringing this person's name up in our very first discussion. Like, we need to get this person on. She's an expert, amazing, wisdom and knowledge. And I don't think I've ever told her in person, that her mentorship and her watching her walk through professionalism and recovery and combining those two things has been immensely helpful for me. And I try to, there are times, especially in my TAAP service work, where I think to myself, what would Sherri Layton do? So without further ado, Miss Sherri Layton.
Well,
Welcome,
hello,
welcome.
gentlemen.
Welcome.
Well,
I'm
thank
so
you,
glad
Joseph.
we finally got you.
That's a quite an introduction. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that.
It's all very true. It's weird. I find it more difficult to say things like that one-on-one in person than I do to say them in very public forum.
Just throw it out there on the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the millennial in me, right?
Right, exactly. Well, and Jason, thank you so much for starting off sharing about your loss with your friend. We have to be able to talk about those things. And so many people, there's still a lot of stigma and shame associated with suicide. And I think that really interferes with people being able, those who are left behind, interferes with them being able to reach out, and get support as they need it. But also people who are in that very dark place and considering something like that, just to say, help, I need help,
Right.
And so
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Sherri, I didn't get your bio. I probably should have pulled it up, but Sherri has worked in treatment here in Texas for over 30 years. You've been the TAAP president. You now serve at the national level with NADAC. I know you've won a ton of awards, both state and I think national. I don't know anybody that knows more about advocating and legislature and the legislature for, looking for rights for substance abuse, individuals with substance use disorders, advocating for professionals. Like, your bio is amazing. And you're also in recovery. So why don't we start there? I know a little bit about your story, but I'd love to hear, the whole thing, I guess, or just a little bit,
Well, the whole, it's not a really long story. The recovery part of my story is a whole lot longer than the using part of my story, and for that I'm very grateful. I was incredibly fortunate to be presented with the opportunity, and just the idea of that there was something different than what I was experiencing as a teenager. And I had recovery presented to me at a very early age, and it worked for me. I know many people say, "Well, yeah, I had my first treatment when I was young, but I didn't get it for a long time." Those kinds of things. And it did, and I didn't get it right away, but I was very fortunate to find recovery at an early age, and um, and that saved me a tremendous amount of psychic damage, physical damage, family damage. So there, but and it also, I just learned so many life skills. So much of who I am today is because learning recovery ideas, learning the principles of 12-step recovery, most especially, um, really formed a lot of who I am as a person, and things that I still just kind of guiding principles for me came out of those early recovery experiences, and I'm super grateful for that. I know that I just feel so fortunate, and I know that my life would have been really really different had I not had that opportunity when I did.
So I know at one point in your recovery, you're pretty heavy involved in PADAP,
Hmm.
which
Yep.
for what is Tracy in Wisconsin, letting her know that that stands for Palmer Drug Abuse Program, and that was kind of a am I wrong in saying kind of like a 12 steps light for adolescents was kind of the idea.
Now, I don't know that we'd say it was 12 steps light, but yeah, it was 12 steps. And the history of that is back in the 1970s when, the whole, when kids started using drugs, and it was,
Because
and that's,
that's when they started. They started in the 70s.
well, there was the 60s, there was the 70s, but that idea that, the generation, our parents' generation, was very, very foreign to our parents' generation. And, and so I was introduced to alcohol and drugs when I was about 12 years old. And, and so back, in the 1970s, there was a fellow who, had gotten sober in, AA, and he was kind of, he was, pretty much of a, didn't have a job, wasn't employed, wasn't employable, he was just kind of a mess, and started hanging around this church and talking to, and became the janitor at this church, and started talking. It was Episcopal church, started talking to the priest there, and they really together kind of began to conceive of this idea of really what did kids need different than the way AA was structured. And if you think about that, adults with families, jobs, those, they come into AA, and there's much of their life that they're still participating in. And with young people, they're your peers are so much a part of your life, and how you spend your time, and who you are, and how you identify yourself, and all those kinds of things. So really creating what today is called an alternative peer group was very much a part of what the Palmer Drug Abuse Program was about. So the program was based on 12 steps, on the 12 steps of AA. There was a modification. The fourth, let's see, there was the second step added. The second step for PADAP was, we found it necessary to stick with winners in order to grow. And then they combined the sixth and seventh step. And so there was, so it's still a 12-step program, but that was primarily the difference. So it was tons of peer activities. Your peer group really became other people in the program. And
Yeah.
so, and we did all the same things that other teenagers did. We just did them together, and we did them, we did them with the support to be sober. So it was, so we, we had a ton of fun. We did we did some really crazy, stupid stuff like every other kid does, and I have friends today that were part of my life back then. We have some, there was actually a 50-year PAAP celebrated its 50 years last summer, and there was there was an opportunity for people, who wanted to come, and they had a celebration for that. So, there was people that all came in from all over the country, to celebrate that, and just fun to see people. And we have a Facebook group. We have we engage in that kind of way, and then a lot of people stay in touch. So it's good.
Well, and a lot of y'all went into working in treatment. I know that, when, some of the names that I really respect of like folks that wrote the LCDC rules here in Texas that, have been advocating since the 80s for all kinds of different changes and reforms and policies. A lot of those folks were PAAPers at one point. And I just think that's so cool. So go ahead.
And, there was no training for alcohol or addiction or drug addiction counselors back then. And so PAAP did create a training program, and PAAP was huge back then. I mean, it was all over Texas. It was, from Florida to California to Michigan to, and across the country. And so it created its own training program. And so it hired counselors from within, put them through their training program. And that's how I got my start as an addictions counselor. And then they formalized the training program when certification began to happen in Texas. They formalized.
They were like, we can't just have these drunks counseling each other. We gotta.
And so there was, and so then there was, and I even went back after had been working for PAAP as a counselor for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, maybe at that point. And I went back to Houston, and I went through the formal classroom training program, which allowed me to get certified at that point. That was, I got certified in 1983, I believe, as a certified alcohol and drug abuse counselor. So that predated licensure by about 8 or 9 years, I think. And so yeah, that's, and there are still some of us that are very, they're in the field that have our roots back there. Other people made their contributions to the profession and now are off doing other things,
That's so wild. I don't know. I trip out. I geek out. Jason, I don't know if you're bored, but I geek out on all this history
Oh
stuff.
no, I am like, my eyes are glued. I'm just trying to think of everything you must have seen since 1983, like the crack epidemic, and then it leading to whatever to prescription pills in the late 90s, 2000s to fentanyl now.
And
yeah, I mean,
in the opioids of the 1970s, the 1980s, it was like, this is not the first opioid epidemic that we've had. It's and there was methadone came in the 1970s, I think. And there was, we're not in our first methamphetamine time frame either. It's like, this stuff cycles. It's not, fentanyl is new, but most of this other stuff, it cycles. It's not really new.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do you stay so positive and motivated and avoid the burnout that we hear about so often with addiction professionals over, when you say, like, I've seen this pandemic and this pandemic and this pandemic, like what keeps you going and so passionate about this work still?
There's a quote that I love, and it says, if you treat a disease that has no cure, treat it with hope. And I really believe that the greatest thing that we offer is hope. You guys have experienced the hope of recovery. I've experienced the hope of recovery. Jason, you talked about when you were talking about your friend having been in some of the deepest, darkest times that anyone can imagine. Joseph, I know enough about your story that, there were very difficult times. I know in my life, even in recovery, I've had very, very difficult, dark times in my life. But we come through those. We've recovered from those, and there is hope. And to be able to know that, to know the truth of that, and then also, I tell people I see the miracle of recovery every day, and how I just don't see how that can get old. It's like there really truly is a miracle that happens in people's lives, and to be able to see that and feel like maybe you contributed to that just a little bit, to me that's energizing to me. That doesn't suck the life out of you. That gives life, I think.
Oh man, you got me choked up on that answer, Sherri.
I mean, and it has to be great to see the stigma being lifted a little bit, I'm sure, from when you started. Because I mean, I know I first got introduced to 12-step meetings. I think my father was court ordered to go to them, and I didn't live with him, but I would stay with him during the summers. And I remember him coming back with little key tags and coming home with a basic text, and there was such a shame about it. Like, he hid it like underneath the couch and didn't want me to like know that he was going to a meeting. And then to now, where it doesn't seem like a walk of shame anymore if you're going to get help. It seems like you're celebrated, and it's like it seems like there's more of a community and things with like being sober curious as teenagers. Like, it just seems to be a lot easier to say like, hey, I need help with this, and that you're not shamed into it. Does that make it easier for you as a professional?
I think yes and no. I think that definitely that I believe people are somewhat more accepting. I don't, I certainly think there's a long way to go for truly fully removing stigma. I read in Time magazine a number of years ago, and they said that, and it was a number of young celebrities had gone into rehab, and they said the comment was essentially that, going to rehab is the new coming of age ritual for young celebrities. And you saw that, it's like they'd get arrested, or they'd really, they'd be on the front page of the National Enquirer, just looking like horrible, they're something that happened, and they had completely, and, really kind of shattered their image, and off
I'm
they
thinking of like the Brat Pack crew, I'm thinking
Yeah.
of like
Robert
Emilio
Downey
Estevez,
Jr.
Charlie Sheen, all those guys, right?
and poor Lindsay Lohan. I mean, she had, they just, there was,
Yeah.
she struggled, and she struggled, and she struggled, and a lot of those folks, and I think the media scrutiny of all of that sometimes has given a what would you say, a cartoonish kind of impression almost,
Mhm.
of the severity of what addiction really does, and the destructiveness of it.
I mean, I think about Britney Spears, the pictures of her hitting that car with the umbrella, the way those went viral
Mhm.
before viral was a thing, or when she shaved her
Shaving her
head.
head, yeah.
And even, I mean, not just substance use, right? Like, since we're talking about it, right? Like mental health, we had Britney Spears, that Amanda Bynes just got her conservatorship overturned. Kanye West is going through some stuff right now. And, I think it sensationalizes a lot of stuff
Mhm.
but you're right. Like, there's less stigma, but there's more like that popcorn eating crowd. Like, let's watch
Mhm.
this.
Right,
And
right.
then you have, shows like Celebrity Rehab and Intervention, and, those kind of things.
Ooh,
And it's like, and Joseph, I know, it's like, that's not what, it's like, that's not
that's
what,
not what intervention looks like at all.
you
Yeah.
know, um, and, and it's, why would you put that all on television anyway? It's like, come on, we're talking about people's lives here, and it's, my dog really, really wants to be on with you guys. I'm trying to get her to stay
Oh,
away.
We love dogs. We love
yeah,
dogs.
we
All
love
right.
them.
Yeah, but she's like stepping on my knee, wanting it to bend a different direction. So it's, I don't know. I like the attention that has been, I like the attention that addiction has gotten. I like the attention that, hey, there are options out there. We talk about, what is it? Millions and millions and millions. I can't remember the number right now, but millions of people, that have a substance use disorder in this country, and only like 10% of them are getting any kind of services or any kind of help. But when they look at that other 90%, what they're finding out is, oh, the bulk of those people don't realize they have a problem, or don't think it's a problem, or they don't understand what a problem looks like. Another big chunk of those folks don't know what help is. They don't know where to go for it. They don't know how to access it. So a whole lot of people that the three of us would look at and go, there's a problem. They're like, I'm good. I don't know what you guys are worried about. I'm doing okay, and, so I think some of this attention now it's helping people to see, well, oh, wow. A friend of mine and I were talking the other night about the, how many characters that are in recovery that are on, weekly television shows now. That would have never happened before. When I was a kid, Dick Van Dyke and his wife, they didn't even get to sleep in the same bed.
Yeah, it's separate beds.
Yeah. Much less talking about alcoholism, So some of that stuff is really, there's good stuff, good stuff can come of that, but I just, the sensationalism and I think the almost kind of cartoonish characterizations that happen sometimes is frustrating to me.
Yeah. Like it's like like sometimes they play it for a laugh, and it's like, it's really not fucking funny a lot of times,
Yeah.
and I feel like I needed to cuss on that too, to kind of emphasize that point.
And we're talking about people's lives,
Yeah.
and this is somebody's parent, this is somebody's child, this is somebody's spouse. So there's other people impacted as well.
Yeah, but then also when somebody is so vocal and so loud about their recovery, and then they slip up and then want it all to stop at that point, there's a little bit of responsibility that goes with that. Like if you're going to be like Demi Lovato, when she would talk about, how great she was doing and all this, and then she would slip up and all of a sudden like want everything to go dark and want people to stop talking about it. It's like, you can't have it both ways.
And I think that's just the price of celebrity,
Right.
Which, the three of us, we don't really have to worry about that unless this
Wow.
podcast goes like crazy people or something.
Joseph's followers are going through the roof now because of this podcast. So,
All right.
It's just a matter of time.
No, I do love working in treatment and being able to feel completely safe to say whatever, and that like I don't have to, hide any of my recovery. But right, like we were talking earlier about, people with some time relapsing and stuff like that, right? The double-edged sword on that is that, I've seen a lot of professionals relapse and feel like they couldn't say anything because I'm going to lose my career. I'm going to lose my friends. I've based so much of my life around this, that they were scared to be shamed by the very people that had been their closest group, for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's all so complicated.
And, when it comes to a professional who will tell, their average client, relapse could be part of recovery. And then when it happens to them, it's not like they're infallible. It happens to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like counselors pursuing counseling,
Yeah.
Right.
Every counselor should have a counselor.
Yeah.
Always.
And practice what we preach,
I saw a meme the other day about, it was a woman had, she heard her counselor talking about their own personal counselor. So she was like, well, I want to go see your counselor because she's probably better than you. And then she's like, what if I keep doing that until I get to the ultimate counselor who's at the top of
the boss counselor?
Yeah, the final boss of counselors. So, what moving into like, I mean, we kind of got off track of what we were trying to talk about, but trying to get us a little bit back on track. In your advocacy work, right? In trying to leverage some of this conversation around substance use to try to get some good done. What do you feel are kind of the biggest challenges that what are the biggest barriers to recovery right now? What are the challenges the treatment industry is facing in that goal of trying to help more people?
Substance use disorder is a small fish in the mental health pond. Mental health is a small fish in the healthcare pond. And so when we start talking about substance use disorder issues, be that recovery, be that prevention, treatment, even harm reduction kinds of services, for us to start talking about that, we have to have people engaging with us, participating with us. Otherwise, we're just this little teeny tiny whisper, and everybody else is this great big roar. And so part of that is just for people to be willing to be engaged, to take that risk. And they can be service providers. They can be people in the people in recovery. They can be family members. But people who will just be a face that says there's a need, and we have to address that need. And I know it's just intimidating to go and talk to politicians.
You and I met Ted Cruz together one time.
Yes,
in DC.
And it can be really intimidating. But the only way to get comfortable with it is to do it. It's like everything else that we talk about. Go face your fears. We tell people that all the time. You got to face your fears. You got to try new things. You got to be willing to take a risk. And, my own advocacy journey, I started this about 18 years ago by accident. This was not in my plan. This was not a goal. I went to a conference. I went to a NAADAC conference, the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers. No, the National Association of Addiction Professionals in Washington, D.C. And I went there to represent La Hacienda. And there was a Hill Day attached because it was in D.C. There was a Hill Day attached to that conference.
So you were just getting the free trip to DC and stumbled across.
It was like, what the heck? I'll go. So I signed up for the Hill Day, and they had a bus that was about 3 or 4 buses that were taking people from the conference hotel down to the Capitol. And so I get on the bus, sit down, and have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just along for the ride. And I finally leaned across to the guy who was sitting across the aisle from me, and I said, "What are we going to do today?" And he goes, "You never done this before?" And I said, "No." I said, I've never done this before. And he goes, "Will you just come hang out with me today?" And his name was Frank. He was from Long Island. Every stereotype that you can imagine about somebody from Long Island. And so I hung out with him. The first thing we did that morning was we had a breakfast, and they did awards. They gave awards at that breakfast. And he got Advocate of the Year award from NAADAC at that breakfast. So I'd hit the mother load, on somebody.
I'm the guy. You're with the guy.
I was with the guy, and he just took me under his wing. And I didn't have to really do anything. I didn't have to say much. And at the end of the day, got back on the bus and went back to the hotel. And I'm thinking to myself, that wasn't really that hard. I can do this, And so, I went back to work, and I talked to my boss, and I said, I told him about some legislation. We were really working on parity legislation at that time. And I said, this matters. This will really make a difference. If we can pass this stuff, this will make a difference. And he said, well, you need to go keep working on it then.
So for our viewers, for Tracy in Wisconsin, what is parity? Explain to everybody what that is.
Parity means that if your health insurance provides coverage for mental health or substance use disorder, that they provided at parity or equal to how they cover medical or surgical procedures or illnesses. And so if so back then when we first started working on this stuff, you might have a $1,000 deductible for medical care, but you had a $5,000 deductible for substance use treatment. You could go for treatment for your diabetes or your heart condition or your cancer as many times as you needed to, but you had a 3-time lifetime maximum treatment for substance use disorder. Or
Jason wouldn't have made it.
Nope.
or
Not
they
even
had
close.
a $10,000 lifetime max, or a $10,000 per treatment max, but they wouldn't put anything like that on a medical condition. And so there was a lot of discrimination when people were seeking care for mental health or substance use disorders. And so what we did was we got Parity Law passed in 2008 that said if your health plan covers mental health or substance abuse, it didn't say it had to. It just says if it does, it had to cover it at parity. And there was a lot of loopholes in that initial law, but then
there's still some loopholes.
There's still some loopholes, yes, granted, but not nearly like there used to be.
Yeah.
But in 2010, the Affordable Care Act passed, and they made mental health and substance use treatment one of the 10 essential benefits under the Affordable Care Act, which meant essentially, there's exceptions because there's always exceptions in legislation, but that extended coverage dramatically for substance use and mental health. And also the Affordable Care Act extended dependent coverage to age 26. Whereas generally speaking, at that point in time, you lost your health care coverage if you're on your parents' coverage, if you weren't in college, if you weren't actively in college, or once you turned 21, sometimes it was 19, So you had all of these. So, young adults with substance use disorder did not usually make it through college successfully, and so they lost their health coverage, or they never went to college, or they didn't get meaningful employment, that healthcare benefits and all that, right out of college. And so you had this big population of people in their early 20s with no health insurance who needed care. And so that extending benefits to 26 was a big deal.
Wow.
So I don't know, Jason, as Sherri's talking, I'm just thinking, I'm like, I got sober in 2008. So like I benefited from some of this advocacy work. Anybody who's gotten sober since 2010 has benefited from some of this advocacy work. If you're in rehab right now and you're 25, like some of it is in part due to work that Sherri has done. Like wild.
The accidental advocate. I think we have a screenplay in the works here.
Yes.
It just became
Sherri, we were debating on what to call you when we were promoting the show. Do we say advocate? Do we say treatment legend?
There was so much to choose from, and to put it in like a 2-second blip, I didn't think we were gonna, it was gonna be a disservice to you anyway around it.
Accidental advocate, we nailed it.
So do you have anything that you would consider to date like your crowning achievement career-wise with anything legislation being passed or anything like that?
Well, none of it is my crowning achievement, okay? Because
nobody else is on here to take credit for it, so we'll let
It's all about me. It's all about me. There's but it really, there, and that's what I mean. It has to be a group effort. It has, like here in Texas, we have a 3-group partnership and we've done this through the last 3 legislative sessions. And I think we're finally getting it right, because we brought, we're the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals. So that is the individual addiction professional, be that a prevention specialist, a recovery specialist, addiction counselor, or someone else involved in the industry. the Association of Substance Abuse Programs. So they represent the providers, the substance use providers in Texas, and then Recovery People. And so Recovery People represents the recovery housing folks, as well as recovery community organizations, people in recovery. And so we kind of brought those three interest groups together into kind of this three-pronged partnership. And we work, we work hard on legislation together. There's a number of groups around Texas. There's the RCO groups, which is recovery community organizations. There's the harm reduction groups. There's the justice groups, the folks who fight for for justice reform, and you can't separate justice reform from substance use stuff, and so we're various people and various groups have their key or their kind of pet project things, their pet legislation, but we all support each other and we all are supporting each other's work. And so it is a strong group effort, lots of people that contribute. But, I'm proud of Parity. I'm proud of how we got substance use included with the Affordable Care Act for essential health and the extension of benefits to age 26. Here in Texas, a few sessions back, we got substance use counselors added to the student loan forgiveness programs for the healthcare programs in underserved areas, so that substance use counselors can get help with their student loans, with their college expenses and stuff. That was a big thing for us. I worked in back in 1991, I worked on the legislation that got us licensed, that now we're licensed chemical dependency counselors. I worked on that legislation. So, I'm proud of that. We were one of the first states in the country that had licensing for substance use counselors.
Texas was ahead of the curve on that one.
It definitely, we're behind the curve on most all other things, but we were ahead of curve on that, and there we passed 7 pieces of legislation this past session, that were important for substance use counselors, and it's things that you don't even really think is important, but if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably heard, about the opioid money, the opioid settlement from the Sattler family, and the billions of dollars, and the folks that that marketed the crap out of OxyContin and said, oh, it's it's just fine.
I wish we had a little sound effect that anytime the Sacklers got mentioned, we just went.
Yeah, well, I got a letter the other day saying that I'm getting some money back for overpaying for Suboxone. So lunch on me, guys. Or I don't think it was the Sacklers who produced the Suboxone, but I'm gonna see some of that sweet opiate money.
Well, if you think back, what was it? I don't know, 10, 12 plus years ago, the tobacco money, the tobacco settlement came about.
Yeah.
And the state got millions of dollars in that tobacco money. And there were, it was supposed to go to all kinds of things that were the effects of nicotine addiction. Well, it didn't, it went into
like campaigns like Truth, who are still run by the same company.
Went into general funds and, stuff like that. Well, we had a senator who filed a bill and it passed last session. We supported that bill. There's an opioid abatement account so that the money that Texas receives will go into a specific account. And then there is a group of people have been assigned to determine how that money will be spent. And there's parameters about how it will have to be spent around addiction, prevention, treatment, and recovery stuff. And so even something like that says, money that's coming from what caused harm, is somebody's going to pay attention to how that money gets spent this time. And so even things like that's nobody thinks about that you passed a piece of legislation for that, but it's
important stuff.
Lots of stuff that's important, and and I could, everybody asked me what legislation did y'all pass last year, and I go blank. And so that's what's happened is I've gone blank, but
But
So
I
it seems
know
like you
I've heard
could.
you talking. Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, it seems like you could work 100 more years on this and still be, chipping away at the major issues. What would you like to see that would you say is tangible in, say, the next 5 years?
I would like to see state funded treatment providers be paid rates that will sustain their business
A
and
living
allow
wage.
and would allow for a higher quality of treatment services to be provided for those folks who require on our publicly funded service providers. I think if I could wish for one thing, I would. I'm on the board for the Association of Substance Abuse Programs, and 95% of the providers that are a member of that organization are publicly funded providers, and they struggle. They struggle. They struggle. They struggle, and you find out the rates that they're paid in their contracts with the state, and it's abysmal.
Yeah.
And so they can't provide the level of service that's needed to address the complexity of problems that individuals with substance use disorder have. And so we need to fix that.
Jason, just as a frame of reference, you've spent more on dinner, on like a nice dinner, than what the state pays for a day of rehab, which requires doctors, nurses, therapists, food.
24 hours, Joseph, 24 hours.
24 hours of
There was,
treatment.
what
do they pay, like 140 something now? 140, 170?
They have increased the rates a bit. But there was a time before their last rate increase, the state's per diem rate for a hotel night was higher than what they paid a provider for 24 hours of residential care. And it's higher now, but it wasn't very long ago.
Bad. It's still bad.
So you didn't even get breakfast with your hotel night.
No, well, if you stay at the La Quinta, you get breakfast.
Holiday Inn
get
Express.
A
I
waffle.
actually did a rate comparison, and I pulled up like La Quinta and Hampton Inn, and I mean, we're not even talking nice hotels. We're not even talking 5-star. We're just talking your basic hotel. And I did a comparison one time, and I said, okay, here's what the state pays for 24 hours of residential care. Here's what it would cost you tonight in Austin to get a room in one of these hotels.
No, you got to come up to Cedar Park if you want to stay in Austin.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is I know that we're working on getting a piece of legislature on the books on the next session, the body brokering bill, right?
Yeah.
We've seen what's happened in Florida and in California and with the body brokering stuff, and it's happening in Texas. It is not to the degree I think yet, but we got to do something about it, and that's another important one, I think.
And that's where Sherri comes in.
We had a bill this past session. Representative Andrew Murr from the Hill Country filed that bill for us. It was House Bill 3313, and it made it all the way through. It was voted. It was heard in the Public Health Committee. It was voted out of the Public Health Committee. It went to the House floor. It was passed in the House, and then this is the process that happens. And then the bill is sent over to the Senate. It was assigned to committee in the Senate, Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate. They voted it out, and it was on to get voted on in the full Senate. And it was, if you remember those last few days of the Senate, I'm not talking about the special sessions when
all the senators ran away.
I'm not talking about that. This was during the regular session. But there was a bit of a conflict between the House leadership and the Senate leadership. And so they kind of just stopped.
They forgot about our bill.
Our bill just kind of got lost in the quagmire of politics.
It wasn't sensational enough.
We got it super. But our bill it's not a new issue. Okay. What we're trying to do, what House Bill 3313 was trying to do, and what needs to happen is to update our, there's 2 laws that were passed in the early 1990s. One is called the Patient Solicitation Act, and it was primarily focusing on physicians, but it umbrellaed over into other areas. And then the other one was the, I think it's called the Treatment Center Advertising and Marketing Act or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact name of it, but this goes back to the early 1990s because patient brokering was rampant in Texas, and all kinds of paying for patients, all kinds of stuff was going on, and it ultimately resulted in investigation of the entire psychiatric industry in Texas by the Texas Rangers, which from what I've heard are not the people you want to get investigated by.
Chuck Norris.
And there was a complete, hospitals started shutting down. There used to be 6 or 7 psychiatric hospitals in San Antonio during this time frame. And then boom, 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 boom. They all started shutting down because, the things that, all the reforms that was happening. And so there was.
So is that what people were talking about when I hear them talk about like the charter hospital days?
Yes.
Okay.
So legislation was passed back then. And what we're trying to do now is update that legislation and bring it into more current, because there was no internet back then. So the internet, bad behavior on the internet that happens with solicitations, we need language that addresses those kinds of things. So we're not even trying to start a new bill here. We're just trying to update it and get it into the 21st century, because unfortunately we've been here before, and we see what's coming. What happens.
So Sherri, we didn't get to half the questions we had for you. I could listen to you talk all day. Like, you're just such a wealth of knowledge. We're going to close with our rapid fire questions in just a second. But before we got to that, I did want to ask you, for our listeners, for the people listening live or going to be listening to it in the coming weeks and months on all the different podcast sites, what can someone who's listening to the show go and do? Like, what's an action they can take to go be an advocate? What's how do you get started? What's one thing they can do to go use their voice for some positive change?
Find out who your state representative is. That's kind of the closest, to you.
Most accessible.
Find out who your state representative is. And in Texas, that's what we call them. They may call them something else in other states. And that person's going to have a district office, and go introduce yourself to their district director, especially if you're working in the field, or you're somehow associated with addiction treatment or recovery or prevention, and go tell them what you do and tell them why it's important and tell them what the needs are. If you're a person in recovery and you have a story about how difficult it was for you to find services or what you're challenged by at this point, what gaps are there in services? Go talk to them about that. Briefly tell your story. Don't overwhelm people with all the naughty details, and don't be afraid to get to know their staff, because their staff are the key individuals that feed information to them. So it's just as important to build a relationship with their district director as it is to build a relationship with your actual elected official. I went yesterday and I talked to my state representative's deputy chief of staff in her office, and she and I talked about specific pieces of legislation, and she will take all of that information to the state rep. And I know the state rep and he knows me, but I can do 90% of my business with her, and it's going to be effective work. So and reach out and find who's doing advocacy work in your state or your area and connect with them. And if you're in Texas, get hold of me or Joseph.
Yeah. We're gonna put me and Sherri's personal cell phone numbers on the bottom of the screen right now. No.
Email address is good.
But that brings us to what I believe is rapidly becoming my favorite part of the show. It's rapid fire question time.
It's rapid fire question time.
Did you like that, Sherri? Jason just made that for us.
Oh, it just
What do we
did
do
not
now?
fit
You
with
didn't
the
tell
rest
me
of what
about
we
this
were
part,
talking
Casey.
about.
Y'all told me you warned her about the run of show. It's okay. They're not hard questions. They are not hard questions.
Okay, here we go. On your mark, do I have a on your mark, get set, go?
Now,
Okay.
Jason, do you have questions?
No, I thought you did.
You didn't come up with questions. Oh, crap. All right. Sherri, what's your favorite smell?
What's my favorite smell?
Yep.
A good cup of coffee in the morning.
Love it.
Beatles or the Stones?
I'm sorry?
Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Rolling Stones.
Oh, I would have guessed you for a Beatles person. Excellent. If you could be a flavor of ice cream, what would that ice cream taste like?
Mocha Java chocolate chunk.
Nice.
Whoa, specific.
What's your favorite step?
My favorite step is in the 12 steps.
Yes.
My favorite step is in the 12 steps. I find the first step to be incredibly useful in so many areas of life. And as much as I don't like it sometimes, just admitting my powerlessness can be the most amazingly freeing thing.
Love it.
Beautiful.
And because this show is sponsored in part by Recovery Unplugged, we got to ask you a music question. All right. If you could pick one song to be the anthem or theme song for your recovery, what would it be?
Oh, wow.
That's the one we got to warn people about.
A song that comes to mind, Forever Young by Rod Stewart.
Okay.
Nice.
For one, I've loved Rod Stewart since I was 12 years old.
Rod the
Which is
Mod.
when you first started drinking, right?
Yeah. But that song has a lot of sentimental value for me, but I also I love the sentiment of it, and that and I feel a whole lot younger than I am most days. And I hope to have a lot more life ahead of me to do fun things. And so I like that song.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, Sherri, thank you for your time today. Like I said, I've wanted to have you on the show since we first decided to do this show.
He was so excited when you committed. He was just, she's coming on. She's coming on. Guys,
I've
she's
been
coming
hounding her
on.
for months.
Yet he didn't prepare rapid fire questions.
But thank you for everything that you've done for addiction treatment in the state of Texas and nationally. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, for your guidance. This show is meant to spread, I guess it is a kind of a form of advocacy, right? It's meant to spread awareness and understanding around substance abuse, mental health, and all the different ways to get sober. And as we like to say, there's 1,000 ways in and there's 1,000 ways out, and we hope you find yours.
Uh-huh.